So this presentation is called the Haunted Band. This is about the 219 to 220 megahertz secondary amateur allocation. And this is the table of contents of what we're going to cover. We're going to talk about the ghost of 219 past, the ghost of 219 present. We're going to veer off and invite you to come haunt with us, and the ghost of 219 future. So the FCC allocated 219 to 220, which I'm just going to call 219 in this talk, for amateur use on a secondary basis. And the allocation is only for fixed digital message forwarding. And just like any other secondary allocation, we can't cause interference to, and we have to accept interference from the primary services. There's also some very interesting geographical limitations for this band. Now, when you talk to various people, or when I have talked to various people about it, they have a variety of comments. Sometimes you can use this band and sometimes you can't, said 85T. Mostly you can't, said the league band managers. You almost certainly can't, said the ARRL counselors. And my response was, oh, so you're saying there's a chance. So first, we're going to talk about the ghost of 219 past. We're going to find out where the bodies are buried. This is the Part 97 rules for this particular segment. And in Part 1 there, it talks about how it is restricted to fixed point-to-point digital messaging forwarding systems, including intercity packet backbone networks. And it isn't available for anything else. So it's very restricted in terms of what you can do on it. And Part 2 is the usual secondary if you're a secondary on a band that you have to accept interference. So those of you that are familiar with the service, this is a familiar condition. And then in particular, we're secondary to something called AMTS, the Automated Maritime Telecommunications System. Then the Part 3 and 4 and 5 here are the specific geographical and notification requirements. So number 3, it says you can't transmit until you've given written notification of your location, the station location, into a database. This notification is supposed to be incorporated into a database that's made available to the public. And you have to do this at least 30 days before you transmit, and it has to be given to ARRL. Number 4, it says you can't transmit from a location that is within 640 kilometers of one of those AMTS coast stations, unless you've notified that station as well. And to get those station locations, those AMTS coast stations, you obtain them as noted in Part 3, which means the American Radio Relay League. And then the final part, it gets a little bit more onerous, I would say. No amateur station can transmit from a location that's within 80 kilometers of AMTS coast station unless you get permission from that licensee. So Part 4 is you just have to notify them if they're 640 kilometers away from you or less. But if they're 80 kilometers away from you or less, you have to ask permission. And in this case, you also are supposed to get the list of stations and AMTS service from the league. Okay, so that sounds simple enough. It looks like you notify the league, and then you get the list of stations. You figure out if one's close to you, either notify or ask permission. So this is a rundown of the geography. You need to know your GPS location, and you need to figure out if any of these stations are 80 kilometers or less from you, and between 80 and 670 kilometers. And you have to do this. You have to do this notification thing at least 30 days in advance. So what is AMTS? It's a special type of public coast station. This dates back to 1981 when the service was established, an alternative to traditional VHF public coast service. This description is at this link from the fcc.gov. Now, at the very bottom of the description, there's something that we will see again. An AMTS licensee may lease all or part of the spectrum usage rights associated with the license. Over in Part 80, there's there's a notification requirement on the AMTS stations. So notice down at the bottom, it says when the station is added to AMTS, the AMTS licensee must send notification of the station's location to the American Radio Relay League and also to this Interactive Systems Incorporated in Arlington, Virginia. Okay, so far so good. What does the band plan look like? Okay, so I picked up the text-based league band plan and the graphical one. So our haunted band is not mentioned in the text version on the left, but notice it does appear in the graphical, it's a nice PDF from the league. And you can see that little orange block there, and it tells you that it's fixed digital message forwarding systems only. And there it is, kind of marooned by itself. Now, the story about 220 to 222 is also very interesting. Okay, so there is a notification form that the league has put out. And if you notice, this is interim form from April 1995. This is the form that you use today. Now, when you get it, it's in black and white. These parts are colored, and you'll see why. But there's the basic information. You see there's 4 blocks here on this form. The licensee information, your transmitter site characteristics, the transmitter characteristics, and the antenna characteristics. The second page is a signed declaration with 10 items on it. You sign it, you date it, and you put in your own remarks. And then also the third page of this form includes the band plan for 219 to 220 from the league. So this is our opinion. That's what the asterisk is supposed to remind me of. This is the opinion of me and a pile of people like me about this form. There are some unnecessary extra restrictions that do not appear in Part 97, and that's the light yellow. The blue, that stuff probably needs to be opt-in for a public database, since this is supposed to be a database accessible to the public. The tan part's kind of debatable. Do you need your height above sea level? Do you need your transmitter call sign? AMTS service doesn't really care about that. And the reddish, light tomato color, that stuff's probably going to change over time. It's not something. We were kind of surprised to see so many questions about the transmitter characteristics and the antenna characteristics. This entire section is a little unusual because if you have your license, you've already agreed to Part 97, and the league says it won't coordinate. It's not going to be a coordinator for 219, but all this extra data makes it look like or feel like the league is trying to coordinate. And again, a lot of this stuff will change. Your antenna orientation, possibly maybe your polarization, your gain, antenna type, that sort of stuff. There is a typo in here that Part 97.303E is actually an L, but it's easy when you're drafting something up to get these confused if you've drafted it up in handwriting. So the form could be reduced to just the white fields, which are here. That's all that's required in the rules. So there is no activity on this band. What is the history of activity? This is what I could come up with. I talked to a bunch of different people. There was a group, an amateur group that used this band, that was active on this band, doing packet links in the 1990s. 2 operators sent in this form in the early 2000s. Now, one would not give their station location or couldn't give their station location, so the form ended up not being accepted by the league. The other person was denied permission to operate from the AMTS licensee that happened to be within 80 kilometers, and the reason given was because of future expansion. And here in California, the AMTS licensees divided up the entire state between 2 companies, which then started suing each other. So it was a tale of 2 primaries. There's lots of drama in the FCC ULS database for these licensees. You can see the court filings. There are dozens, and I learned some new insults and some very interesting turns of phrase from the back and forth between the lawyers. And then KB5MU spotted an older ARRL letter from 2002 that they were advertising for a field organization assistant with duties including the AMTS program for 219. So let's talk about the present, where we dig up the bodies and we look at them. Who is the lucky person in charge today at the league? See what I did there? Well, it's Bart Yankee, W9JJ. He is the radio, sport, and regulatory information manager at the league. Now, be good to him. He has been good to work with. It is not his fault that this band is haunted, and there's lots of scary stuff about it. So that database mentioned in Part 97 of those AMTS stations. So we requested it from Bart. We know that AMTS licensees have to notify the ARL of their station locations. And we know that amateurs have to notify ARL of station locations. We know the database must be available to the public, so we asked for it. Bart said, go, you're going to have to use ULS. There's no databases at ARL. And then that kind of begged the question, does this mean that there isn't anybody to notify or ask permission of? How to find these AMTS stations? Just in case that answer to that question is, well, yes, these stations are out there, and just because this database has not been compiled or is not currently available, doesn't mean that you can just ignore it. But that is a question. I put it here in the slides for a reason, and we'll come back to it. Now, Bart says, go ahead and go to ULS. Find these coast stations. And he gave a couple of screenshots of how to use ULS. Now, it does say that we should be able to get this from ARL. Bart is the representative from the league, and he's pointing us to ULS. So here's his advice. This is how you set up the search in ULS. And this is the result that you'll get from his recommended search when you put in the state of California, you put in PC for public coast stations, you make sure that you're looking at 219 to 220, and you get this list, so you get these results. And then you can download this text file, or you can just start clicking through on the different call signs. Now, there are some problems with doing a search this way that we found. First off, putting California into the state entry in ULS does not return stations in California. It sort of looks like it should work that way, but instead it returns any record with an address in California. So stations that actually transmit in California that have out-of-state business addresses are not going to appear using this particular type of search. Another problem is that if any of you have ever used ULS to try to track anything down like this, it can be difficult to use. Understanding the format of the downloaded text results takes some time and effort. And another thing, since we're expected to find the station locations, there are very few. I found one AMTS call sign with tower locations in ULS. So solutions, just being a practical person, using our amateur radio spirit, do your best. Put that California into the state entry, do your best. Take those results, go through them. Learn how to use ULS. Can you calculate distances from the ULS results? This is tempting to use that at the bottom of the page in the search results, but the geospatial ULS search did not work for me, and I tried multiple times. With no locations, may have to go to an expert or consultant for help. This is pretty common in commercial telecom, that you call up an expert, you go get somebody that's GIS aware or knows the database really well. So Bart's ULS search, when you download the text file, this is what it looks like. This is the header file from that downloaded ULS search. There's 25 results. Each row is a result. Now, the header file format tells us all sorts of stuff. There are 50 fields per row in a ULS header file entry. Not all of them are populated. An amateur radio service header files follow this format too. For each header entry, there's a whole body of data that exists, and this body of data is distributed across a number of other files. So I drew this little diagram here. There's a header file for a particular radio service. And then all of these things are the support files. You can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. There's 11 different types of files that will be pulled when you do a search for those AMTS stations that you are supposed to ask permission of or notify. So as a comparison, here's the amateur radio header file and support file structure. And you can see there's less files involved, comparing a commercial service that is fixed or mobile to to an amateur radio service. You can see that there's fewer. If you're interested in how the amateur radio ULS records are structured, I gave a RATPAC talk about a year ago called Who We Are, and I extracted demographic data about the amateur radio service, and we walked through the header formats and the entity, EN, history, HS, and amateur files. What does this look like? When we go through these rows, we first get the record type, that HD. Next is a unique system identifier. There's got to be some way to keep track of you. There's a ULS file number. Got to be another way to keep track of you. Next is an EBF number, the US electronic batch filing, automated process so that stuff matches. Call sign, we know what that is. And then license status is the next field. And it could be active, canceled, and expired. Those are the ones that you see in the amateur radio service. And there's a couple of other license statuses that are used in other services outside of amateur radio. You get a radio service code. It's PC for public coast stations. You get the grant date, expired date, and cancellation date. Pretty familiar. An eligibility rule number. I'm still not sure what that is. The next one's reserved. We then have a section about aliens. I'm not saying it was aliens, but it was aliens. There's alien government, alien corporation, alien officer, alien control, and then revoked. You kind of want that to be a no, I'm pretty sure, for any type of license. The next section talks about whether it's convicted, adjudged, or reserved. Are you a common carrier or non-common carrier, or are you private communications? And you can see that that one is filled in yes. Are you fixed? Yes. Mobile? Yes. Do you do radio location? That one's left blank. It's blank for satellite. Is it a STA or demo? No. Is it an interconnected service? No. Okay. Now we're getting someplace where we might be able to make contact with people. We get a certifier, first name, middle initial, last name, suffix, title, and then there's an interesting section of all sorts of demographic data. Now, all of these are blank, but you can see that these are all headings. These are all categories from the US Census. There are some services that are required to report demographic data. We get effective date, last action date, auction ID, and then a bunch of stuff about broadcast type service. And then the last bunch don't apply to either amateur radio or AMTS. Okay, so that's what the header file looks like. The other files are entity history and market position. The entity one is one that's useful. That has all sorts of entity information in it. The history file gives you a history of everything that happened to that license. In the amateur service, you would see renewals or expired licenses, and in some cases, canceled licenses. Market frequency, that's those are the frequencies. That's going to be important for us. And then the MC file, market coordinate. This gives you these polygonal areas on a map. That is important for us to figure out who are we close to. What's even more valuable to us is the LO file, location. These are specific GPS coordinates of towers. So one would really hope that if you were trying to operate on this band, that you could get an LO file for every header entry, for every call sign. There's more. There's additional location data, special conditions, license free form, special conditions, and there's some very interesting long text blurbs in there. There's a comment section, and then the license attachment section. Oh boy, this is where all sorts of bankruptcies, lawsuits, various pleadings. Okay, still with me? Just these 25 results with all of the support files, all of these that we've walked through, was 7.3 megabyte plain text file to just get 25 results from ULS. So remember that. The only call sign with location data where I could get actual tower locations was this call sign WQYR421. And the only location near my intended station on Palomar Mountain is in San Clemente. And guess what? It was 74 kilometers away, which is less than 80, which means I have to ask permission before I attempt to transmit. All right, so how did we figure this out? Well, we know where the amateur station is because it's ours, and that LO file had tower GPS coordinates, so we just used mapping software. Or we could just look at the locations tab in the GUI, the graphical user interface for ULS. And this is what it looks like when you go back to ULS. You know, we can keep working with these text files and we get lots of good information there. Or we could one by one go through and look in the GUI to the ones that we know are nearest. So here's what it looks like from the main page when you type in that call sign. Here's what if you look at the locations tab. These are all towers, we think. And you can see they have GPS coordinates on the right, and then like a city name and a county name, kind of nice in the middle. This is the map tab. So if you have a map tab by itself, it's going to have these green polygons, and that's going to be from not from the LO file, but from one of the map files. So here's the one with all the towers arrayed, and as you see along the bottom, it's really kind of nice. It shows you the license spectrum range. So it's showing you exactly where in the AMTS band, and they can operate from 217 all the way up to 220. You can see where exactly they've gotten a slot. There's A and B in this band, so there's A licenses and B licenses. This is what it looks like if you don't have location data of the towers. You just have their service area, that's it. And for this particular call sign, you can see, if you look at the little teeny tiny triangle right by Tijuana, well, that's right by San Diego. That is definitely close enough to where we'd have to ask permission, but where are the towers? Here's a zoomed in part of that map that had the towers in it. Okay, so what does the site in San Clemente look like? Well, went to Google Earth and found it. And boy, that looks like a tower with antennas on it. This particular license is operated or is listed under the Southern California Regional Rail Authority. Now, I know we said maritime, but there's a railroad right by this tower, and it's operated by a rail authority. Remember that part about how an AMTS could lease out their licenses? Well, that is what has happened to a great extent. When a railroad leases out AMTS, they're using it for positive train control, or PTC. And here's another view. So there it is. Sure enough, there is a tower there. Here is sort of the line of sight or drawing on the map from Palomar Mountain, where I want to operate, to San Clemente. Here's what it looks like in a line of sight profiler. So there is some granite clouds in the way. So you can see here what that path might look like. So if you wanted to come haunt with us, what would we do next? How do you notify an AMTS licensee? Well, the league doesn't do this for you. That would be kind of nice, I think. Well, who do you write? And how do you ask permission? And exactly how do you notify? And has this ever worked? The answer is not yet. But the advice from some radio aware lawyers is that you want to phrase your notification or your request for permission very carefully. And there is some advice, so we're starting to build up some templates, and you do need to kind of think a little bit more sneaky than our usual amateur radio goody two shoes, do everything the right way personas would normally guide us towards. So you're probably going to cite the FCC regulations and say something like pursuant to 97303, whatever. I am notifying you of operations that will commence on some day. So who do you write? The contact information is in ULS. It's in the entity file. So you will get some addresses. And if you go and double check in ULS, you will see their title. And it kind of depends on each call sign. It may have multiple people listed. Some might be a regulatory contact. Some of them might be a manager. Some of them might be a lawyer. And at this point, the best thing to do is try to find out as much information about the people that are listed as you can. If you can find someone who happens to be an amateur radio operator themselves, that may be a good bet. If you can find somebody who has sort of a history uh, of 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 speaking or writing about secondary users in maybe not a not a terrible way. Like if you can get any hint that they might be a reasonable person to reach out to, then that's probably the best person. And so this is where we're trying to build up maybe a set of advice, a little bit of guidance on how to approach primary. So there's reasons that we should not bother to do this, of course. There's zero activity on this band. There's no live operators on this band. It's totally haunted, scary. New band who dis? Primaries aren't compelled to answer at all. And, they're not compelled to reveal themselves and to send in notification of their station locations to ARRL. It is in the rules, but there isn't anything to make them do it. There isn't any punishment or repercussions for not sending that information to the league. And they can deny secondary station requests because it's Tuesday. They don't have to have a good reason. They can just say no. And it's dank in there. Digital messaging forwarding and packet backbones. A lot of people have told me, Michelle, their time has come and gone. There's no demand for the one thing authorized by the FCC. And wow, I think I've tried to show you that findability of these stations, the primary stations, is hard. It's not easy at all to figure out who is who at the zoo. But there's lots of reasons that we absolutely should do this because it's there. We're supposed to activate our bands to the best of our abilities. And this one is so haunted. Quality. 200 megahertz is great. It's reliable, rain resistant. There's directional antennas available, and it has decent range. And it's dank with digital message forwarding. Look on the bright side. Think hard about an innovative reboot of digital links. We're supposed to be doing at least 56 kilobits per second on this band. 100 kilohertz channels was what the league kind of established with their band plan. That's a voluntary band plan. If we can come up with something better, faster, more cooler, then here's a chance. And you know what? If you are out to kind of get your name known at the league, pretty much everyone will know your name if you fill out the form and then get on the air. Okay, so what might a station look like? What do you need in order to kind of experiment on this band? Well, you're going to need antenna. Something like this will work. It's like a heavy duty Yagi. It's a 220 megahertz capable from DigiKey. It has 7 dBi and covers the range and can handle up to 150 watts. The highest that you are going to be able to transmit is 50. So this is more than adequate. So something like this. And then the station components. So you'll need a 219 megahertz capable SDR or retro radio, possibly a transverter, amplifier for up to 50 watts, some sort of embedded processor or computers to control it's going to be kind of important, cables, all the usual enclosures and a place to put things. So here's some potential software-defined radio gear. The RTL SDR or the FunCube dongle actually can handle this band. It's receive only. But you can set up a monitoring station and figure out if there actually is any traffic from AMTS or PTC. The SDR Play covers this as well and receive only. A Lime SDR or a USRP or a HackRF clone, they all cover this band and that adds transmit. So there's lots of options here for experimental stuff. Legacy gear. Here is, I'm just going to call them legacy radios. This is basically any legacy radio that would tune a 219 would be good. You could build your own modem or go retro with a WA4 DSY 56 kilobit per second modem. And this required a transverter because it comes out on 28 to 30 megahertz and it has serial interface. This was used for packet radio networking. Some of you may have one or have had one in the past. So here's some more potential gear suggestions from Paul, KB5MU. 432 megahertz linear transverter came in 220 megahertz version as well. It's from the MMT. So keep an eye out for that. Q5 Signal, which took over from Down East, has a 222 megahertz transverter with a 50 watt output. And the right 28 megahertz IF, it can be customizable for other IFs. And they could probably supply it for 219 if you asked. Now, on the baseband side, you'd need something that would keep up with the data rates. And so the list goes on. There are a couple of options here. We found a hookup diagram for the PACCOM Spirit 2 pad. The PS186 is said to be infamous. And there's an Ottawa PI-2 card, a DMA-driven packet interface card for ISA bus computers. Okay, so cornucopia of delights out there. Don't forget the amps. It looked like there were plenty available. Okay, so let's talk about the ghost of 219 future. So about those data rates, there's 100 kilohertz channels from that 219 megahertz band plan. No less than 56 kilobits per second is the goal. That's from the band plan. And I think we should think bigger. I think we should take advantage of modern equipment and methods and update and upgrade and figure out something kind of new, dig in. This is an opportunity for an innovative future. We can deploy 56 kilobit per second digital message forwarding stations and packet backbones like we always have. No problem. We can also design entirely new types of digital messaging forward stations and experiment, and both types can coexist on 219, especially if your experimental ones are adaptive, that they work around any of the, I'd say, older or legacy gear type. So for any of this experimental stuff to happen, we have to activate this band. If you want to help, then notify the league of your intention to operate 219 megahertz. Use that form, or just send in the bare minimum, read it through Part 97, and go ahead and just send in exactly what that says on a postcard to the league. Tell your technical coordinator, your league technical coordinator, most sections have one, what you're up to. Let them know. Without potential operators, we can't start documenting results of attempts to activate the band. In other words, attempts to either notify with no bad results or ask permission. All results are good, even if it's a denial or no response. If we get on the band, it's great. If we end up with like 100% denial rate, which is what we have had so far for decades, then we can think about proposing a rules change. All right, that is it. I would like to answer your questions and hear your opinions or experiences. There may be people out there listening to this that have this gear, that activated this band, that have thought about it in the past. And I would very much like to hear from you, share all of your opinions here this evening.
Crickets, crickets, crickets.
Oh, I see a comment. Oh, thank you, Alex. The Pluto and the Pluto Plus version of it are receive and transmit capable, full duplex even. Yes. I'm a big fan of the Pluto. This is a workhorse in the lab, and yeah, it deserves to be in the lineup there. So before I send the slides in to Dan, I will add that one.
Thank you. Okay, hands up. Troy, you got something to say? Hop on there and do it.
Yeah, you were talking about how if people were to use this, it would be better to come up with new innovative ways to do the. Sorry, I have a kid talking in the distance, and the other one yelling at her now. The to come up with newer innovative ways to do backboning. Is there any specific technology you have in mind, or are you just kind of thinking broadly? This is sort of a area that could kind of be more of a playground for hands going forward.
Oh, it's a really good question. So, um, both and I think is going to be my kind of greedy answer. I do have a couple of there's been lots of protocol development in the past couple of decades, and anything that does digital messaging, like data links, and does them, uh, would would I think be something well worth looking at. Even if we only got stations up and running in with very traditional digital messaging, it would still be a huge victory and a really just a big step forward. So I'm kind of more in favor of, like you said, playground, and that's a really, really good word. Like really kind of pushing experimental work on this band. Um, and I also wholeheartedly support, anybody getting equipment out and showing us how it was done. No, it's not really a very good. I'm doing a both and, not either or. But I'm doing the both and with enthusiasm. So, Paul may have some opinions on this and some ideas about potential protocols to look at. I know that we talked about a few. So Paul, yeah, if you want to talk about anything like potential protocols specifically, then please do. Let's see. Jed in 6JED says the paperwork makes this something that one would like to do when there is nothing else to do. Yeah, this is a remarkable amount of burden, I think, to put on amateurs. You saw how hard it was to kind of figure out if there's even, to kind of go through ULS and filling out forms, to both to the league and then also, attempting to contact people at companies is quite a lot. So I concur. It would be nice if that was no longer necessary. Um, and there has been some reduction in the paperwork and in the concerns, because if you look back through the Part 97 and the Part 80 about AMTS, you'll see references to television channels. There used to be 2 television channels uh, that you had to watch out for, that the AMTS people had to watch out for, and time has passed, and these channels are no longer kind of in the way. So things do change. So that at least that concern is lessened over time.
Okay, Tony, go ahead. Rory, I'm sorry. Hi, Tony. Go ahead, Troy.
There we go. I had to unmute myself. So another thing just fell right on my. Oh, there it is. The When you were doing your research, it sounds like you found a few cases where they had leased the band. Is this kind of a case of we are, the not we, but the FCC is allocating this band to an organization or companies that don't actually need it and they're just using it as something they can sell elsewhere? Or is this a case of there are plenty that they're operating directly? It's just occasionally they lease it out.
Oh, it's a really good question. I don't know because I haven't gone through every licensee for AMTS, but I did see lots of bankruptcies, and there's lots of leases to railroads. That the railroads actually seem to be a big consumer of these licensees, and they use it not for public coast stations, which is maritime, and this was originally designed back in 1981 for like inland waterways and coastal shipping. But it now is all over the place. Anywhere there was a railroad, that seems to be where the big users are today. And then there was a few companies that I found that I couldn't figure out exactly what they were doing. It could have been train, but the names of the companies didn't match up with any train company. But it's pretty clear that it can be leased. The original AMTS licensees could lease it, and they definitely have. So it's quite a tangled web of different types of communications. And so what I did, a couple of us went ahead out to WebSDR, and we looked for web SDRs out there. Just these are receivers you can log into that are all over the world, And I looked for ones that were near the coast. I found one in Florida that actually had 219 included. And I sat there for a long time, and I tried to set up, like, is there some way to do an alarm or alert? And I I didn't see any traffic, so it's not constantly, it's not constant traffic. It's not like a LTE or bands like that. It's pretty intermittent. And I'm not familiar enough with positive train control transmissions to know how often they come along or how directional they are. So we're going to keep looking at it and trying to figure out what the usage of the 219 band really is. So far, it seems pretty light, and that makes me optimistic that one of us will get a positive result and be able to operate on the band.
Kind of feels like if there's, a lobbying organization out there that maybe likes to push our interests, that maybe showing that it's not used by the primary user and it's mostly just something they're leasing out to make a dollar, making them brokers, kind of the middlemen, that maybe it's time to allocate something specific for railroad control systems and give that back to us. Just throwing that out there. I don't think an organization like that exists, but if it did.
Very good.
I'm an AR member. I'm just joking.
Yes, yes. No, I'm hoping that if there's a number of people that would be willing to go ahead and fill out the form or send in your notification to ARL, with enough people in this database, it will become a more of a priority. And working together, I think that we can get results. And like I said, I want to emphasize, getting a negative result, a denial on paper, and building up a pattern of denials it's not as good as getting permission or having the notifications go through without a hitch, but it is just as useful. So if we do absolutely nothing and there's no activity on this for another decade, who would notice if it just went poof? And it's just too cool of a band not to go ahead and fight for it. So if you got time, fill out that form, write Bart Yankee at the league, ask for the long form, or just send it in on a postcard from the thing in Part 97. And Paul, did you have any corrections or comments for me?
Only one. You were suggesting there might be a specific idea about the data link. I don't have one, but I would like to point out that this ties in to the further notice of proposed rulemaking, or I think that's the right phrase, asking about bandwidth limitations on VHF, because 219 is a VHF band, and if we want to use more than 100 kilohertz channels, we might need to get that taken into account when they set bandwidth limits to replace the baud rate limits.
That's a really good point, because I think, does VHF have a bandwidth limit today of 20 kilohertz?
I was going to go look that up, but I didn't quite get there.
Yeah, because that's an interesting thing that the league in the forum said 100 kilohertz channels for their band plan. So that's interesting. And yeah, it looks like that might be something to put into, or add to the further notice of proposed rulemaking. And for those of you that are not familiar with what we're talking about with this further notice of proposed rulemaking, well, we just had a RATPAC talk about it, the symbol rate rule for the HF bands and also VHF and UHF, that symbol rate or baud rate limit rule that's gone. So there's a report and order. I think the vote on it will be the 15th of November, I believe. This is going to be in the monthly open meeting at the FCC. This has been a long time coming. The work started back in 2013 for this. There was a lot of work done in 2016 and 2017, and many of us have been working to kind of remove the baud rate limit. So that happened on October 25th. And there's an opportunity in so there's a report and order, which this is the order, this is the rules change, but there's also an opportunity to talk about, to weigh in on the bandwidth limits for VHF and UHF. So it would seem to be kind of a conflict if VHF is really 20 kilohertz limit from the FCC. Then the advice from the league for 100 kilohertz channels would seem to kind of be a conflict. But
okay, I found that answer. It's note 13 is the one that applies, and it is a 100 kilohertz limit for just that 219 to 220 megahertz.
Oh, cool. Okay, so it was already an exception?
It's not an exception. It's just the only bandwidth limitation that applies in that area. There's most of the bands are under note 5, which is a 20 kilohertz limit, or note 6, which is a 100 kilohertz limit. But note 13 is the one that applies in 219 to 220, and it has a 100 kilohertz limit.
Okay, thank you.
All these scientists we have with us.
No, it's definitely fun. It's absolutely haunted. And just, yeah, I have to admit that after being an amateur operator for a long time, I had no idea this band existed until not that many years ago. And I come across hams that have no idea that this little slice exists at all. So it's there, and it's kind of up to us to kind of hack through the extra impediments that are in our way. And my hope is that if we do some work together now, that it will get easier and easier, and that we will create some really cool, innovative digital activity on this band.
Okay, anybody else out there? Chat or hands up? Crickets, crickets, crickets.
Yeah, is there any suggestions, or anybody that anybody can recommend to go to for advice? I've spoken to almost all of the previous like counselors and people that have worked for the league, and many of the previous band managers. But if there's anybody in particular that you think might be helpful to talk with, then please let me know. And what I'd like to do is give it a shot to keep trying doing what we're doing, and make progress and reach out and get either permission or a denial, or develop the notifications, get some practice with this, and then come back to RATPAC and give a report. And also to actually build up a station. We can't legally transmit without doing all these notifications and geographic things, or alternatively, the lawyer tells us, since none of the AMTS stations have reported their existence to the league, maybe the conclusion is that we're off the hook. I think that's kind of a stretch, and that's a very optimistic sort of view. But with a band where we have no experience, the last time somebody tried to do this was 20 years ago. It's
you might talk to Mike Ritz, the Northwest director, W7VO. He was, if he's not still, on the band plan thing for the ARRL, and he should know the players for you.
Okay, thank you. And if anybody is interested in collaborating, or if you're seeing this recording and you'd like to play, just get in touch with me, and W5NYV Whiskey 5 November Yankee Victor at ARRL.net.
Plus tax. Okay,
Well,
we're getting quiet
yeah,
here.
yeah, I really appreciate everybody. Thank you so much for coming out and listening to this scary story the day after Halloween. I've been looking forward to doing this for quite a while, and I'm looking forward to coming back with news, with more ghost stories.
Stay tuned.
Yeah, stay